Pentecost Sunday, so everybody should have worn red for the Passion. But since we didn't, there's some, I think they put the red hangings out. Yeah. So we're going to have the Gideon speaker today instead of the pastor. A lot of people were affected by the storm and either have power out or lots of limbs down at their house.
We didn't put these in every bulletin because if anybody wants a Gideon donation card, I have them and I'll leave them in the back of the church.
There's some in the, aren't there some in the vestibule?
Yes, there should be, yeah.
Anybody want any here, I'll give them to them now if you want any.
Those are for Mott, but there's some on the table there.
Does anybody need a Gideon handout? Okay, I'll put them out front.
Okay, so today Clyde is on vacation. I forget where he went.
Clyde and his grandson and his sister, they all went up to Pennsylvania for his 50th high school reunion.
Ah,
And then he went to Gettysburg, and he's up at Fort Myer right now. Him and his grandson are going to Arlington Cemetery to watch a funeral.
oh, that would be nice. I mean, not the funeral would be nice, but it's nice to be up at Arlington and see all the stuff. Okay, the announcements you can see in the bulletin. We got the yard sale coming out. There are 2 thank yous in there to the men's class for their donations to the Memorial Home and Safe Home, and also to our class for our donation to VBS and the Memorial Home. There's her things. Thanks. And there's some stuff for the Memorial Home, but she can get it Monday or something when she's here.
I want to ask a question. When you paid the Memorial Home your donation, you just take a check over there, do you know?
Lot would know. Doug? She has a question about the Memorial Home.
When the men's class made their donation, they just took it over to the Memorial Home
Mott probably took it over.
in the form of cash or?
I was looking, it would be cash. Where's Wayne?
He's in his class.
In the men's class.
Still.
He would be the one that knows, I'm pretty sure it's cash.
Okay,
If it's not, I'll bet you.
okay, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, so we're getting a bunch of yard sale stuff over there, but keep a bringing. There's, yeah. June 29th, not only are we having Fifth Sunday lunch, but also there's the annual Lucas Avenue barbecue. We're supposed to bring baked beans and or dessert. What? Lucas Avenue. You remember them right down the street. And they're going to have a patriotic concert afterwards by the Rankin family. It'll be about 5 to 7. It usually goes on. It lasts about an hour. The 5th Sunday, the men will grill hamburgers and hot dogs. Just bring a side dish and or dessert. And then the Seasoned Saints in September. We can kind of put that on the back burner. So also, if you have any other things to add to the calendar, let me know. On our prayer list, we are going to add Jeff Ellis back on. He's the one who had the liver transplant, and he's back in the hospital with complications. Terry Google, I think it is Guegel, was in a bad car accident. So remember him. Ed Darnell is back in the hospital. He's in ICU right at the present time. He's unresponsive, or he was last time Mont talked to Millie last night. What?
I talked to Tommy Estes' wife, and she said, he's doing okay. Said he's getting there.
Okay.
So I just wanted y'all to know, he's doing pretty good.
Anybody else we need to add in? So keep Ed and Millie in your prayers, of course. How are you? Yeah, you still having your vertigo and stuff real bad? Dorothy Starrett, so keep her in your prayers. She's still. Yeah, she's on the prayer list. She's still recovering from that. What? Stare it. Sorry. No, you'll have to correct me again, I'm sure. Donna called this morning. She won't be here, but it's because they're celebrating Father's Day early because she and Emma will be going off for I think a beach trip next weekend. So they're going to stay at home and celebrate Father's Day early. Anybody else on our list we need to add? Okay. Janet, you want to open us in prayer?
Dear Heavenly Gracious Father, we thank you for bringing us here today to reflect and listen to the word that Luann's going to be bringing, and just to be with each other. This has not been a great time, but it's not been a bad time either. It's just seems like there's just been a lot of accidents and tragedies that have been surrounding our community and even within the class. And we just pray, Lord, that you'll put your physician's hands on each and everybody's heart as needed, whether it be physical, emotional, mental. You know what our needs are, Father, and we ask that you address them according to thy will. We also ask that you help govern our government, help them make the right decisions that's best for the world, not just the United States, but whatever decisions we make seem to affect the entire world. And we ask that the right ones give them their guidance that they need to make the ones that will benefit all countries involved. And we ask that you take care of our military troops, Father, as they continue to defend our country. Every day putting on the uniform, knowing that their life is truly at risk. And again, we thank you for this glorious day, the rain, the storms. Doesn't matter, you all gave us your breath of life, and we're all here today. And Lord, we just thank you each and every moment, and each and every breath. In your holy name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Janet. Okay, we have this week, we're doing chapter 11. Then we have next week is chapter 12, and Steve will give you those. That's a short chapter. And then we get into If You're Not Dead, You're Not Finished. And we hope to have those books today, but, you know, they're not. They'll be here soon. And they're a very easy read book. I think you'll enjoy it. It's got a lot of humor along with the thing, but also because it talks about those of us who are a little up in the age bracket. You're only as old as you think you are. I think it has some good lessons that we need to be reminded of. Sometimes you know it, but you don't. You don't quite remember things. Things, you know, your aches and pains can get you down, but there are things that we have with age and experience that we need to be reminded are blessings from the Lord. Okay, Ecclesiastes chapter 11. This has some difficult stuff in it. It's coming up in the first few verses, verses 1 through 2. Solomon commanded good works without expecting a reward or gratitude. God will see to it that recompense is made in some form or another. Sometimes you don't get your reward right away for doing a good deed. Solomon encourages us to do good works out of the kindness of our hearts and not for profit, because it's not only the things you do, the actions, but what the meaning is behind it. That's, if you remember Jesus fussing about the Pharisees and Sadducees that gave a lot of money or gave tithes of their, all the way down to their seasonings, but didn't fulfill their obligations in other ways and put burdens by their traditions on other Jewish people. Luke 6:33 through 36 says, "And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that." So, if you have a party and invite all your friends, knowing they're going to invite you back, that's not exactly what he's talking about. I mean, it's a good thing to do, to fellowship with one another, but when he's talking about good works, he's talking about those who can't give back to you. "And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back."
Gwen, I have the new Mark Lowry CD I ordered at Amazon, or no, well, I don't know. But there's the song that I love, that I listen to the most is, "I don't know what kind of sinner you are, but I know what kind of Savior He is." And it is really good. We don't know what sins others have committed, but we can still pray for them.
That's
They
true.
may not want you to pray for them, but they can't make you stop.
Yep.
I don't know what a sinner you are, but I know what a Savior that He is. I think it's called "There Is Hope" by Mark Lowry. The Gaithers have it out, I think, but I think Bobby Tucker got it for me. He goes to church with Mama.
Yeah. "Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Share your food with those who need it. We ought to show unrestricted benevolence. Why? First, because it is God's will. But Solomon was also addressing many people who are naturally self-centered. He provides us with a second reason. There can come a time when we are no longer able to give help and may need it ourselves. Therefore, we should make friends now who will comfort and help us in our misfortune." That didn't work out so well with the prodigal son. He hosted all his friends, but then when he was down and out, they kind of deserted him. Jesus advised his disciples to make friends for yourself by means of the mammon of unrighteousness. Then when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. That's Luke 16:9. This appears to be an unprincipled incentive for doing good works. Worldly motives are essentially advised as practical in the conduct of our lives. However, we must look at the context of Luke 16. Now, I know we're in Ecclesiastes, but I'm going to read Luke 16, 1 through 18. "He also said to his disciples, 'There was a certain rich man who had a steward, and an accusation was brought to him that this steward was wasting his goods. So the master called him and said to him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward." Then the steward said within himself, "What shall I do? For my master is taking my stewardship away from me. I cannot dig. I am ashamed to beg. I have resolved what to do."
Wait a minute, where are you? Ecclesiastes?
Luke 16.
Oh, Luke 16, okay. No wonder it's not making it up. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have resolved what to do, that when I'm put out of my stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So he called every one of his master's debtors to him and said to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" And the man said, 100 measures of oil. So he said to him, "Take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, "How much do you owe?" And the man said, 100 measures of wheat. And the steward said to him, "Take your bill and write 80." So the master commended the unjust steward because he had dealt shrewdly. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generations than the sons of light. Some consider this to be one of Jesus' most difficult parables, and me included, because it seems that Jesus used an obviously dishonest man as an example to his disciples. Yet God sometimes uses evil things that are familiar to us to illustrate a particular point without praising the thing itself. Other examples of this principle are when Paul used things like war and slavery as illustrations of the Christian life. Yet the dishonest steward was a good example on several points. First, he knew he would be called to account for his life, and he took that seriously. Christians should take seriously the idea that when they are called to account, that they will be called to account, and the idea can be a joy if we are properly about our master's business. Second, the steward took advantage of his present position to arrange a comfortable future. Jesus' assessment is still true. The sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. If we pursued the kingdom of God with the same vigor and zeal that the children of this world pursue profits and pleasure, we would live in an entirely different world. It could be said that it is the shame of the church that Coca-Cola is more widely distributed than the gospel of Jesus Christ. Simply, it is because the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. McLaren, who is a Christian apologist, said, "Go to the men of this world, thou Christian, and do not let it be said that the devil's scholars are more studious and earnest than Christ's disciples." When it talks about making friends for yourself by unrighteous mammon, Jesus transferred the principle of this parable, reminding us that we need to use our present resources to plan ahead for eternity. Wealth is not necessarily evil. It can be used for good or evil, whichever you decide. And our resources, as we all know, are given to us by the Lord. As to unrighteous mammon, the word mammon is from the Arabic word mammon, which originally meant that in which one puts one's trust, hence wealth, that in which one puts one's trust. So it's kind of like, what's the saying that's in there? Wherever you put your trust, there your heart will be. You'll have to look it up. I don't have the phone. Jesus called it unrighteous mammon because riches promise much and perform nothing. You know, we all sit around thinking, oh, if only I won the lottery, I could make everybody in my family happy, and I could solve this and solve that. Money doesn't do that. Mammon excites hope and confidence and deceives in both. In making a man depend on them for happiness, they rob him of the salvation of God and of eternal glory. That when you fail, they may receive you into their everlasting home. The world is filled with financial planners and advisors, and it is good for Christians to learn how to use their money wisely. But when most Christians talk about wise money management, they forget to practice the most important kind of long-term investing with an eye to eternity, an everlasting home. The important thing is to invest your resources for the Lord now. Most of us wait until the day when we think we will have enough. In a survey taken long ago, 1992, which actually that is quite a ways, 30 years, something like that, a little bit more, people were asked how much money they would have to have their American dream. Those who earned earned $25,000 or less a year said that they would need around $54,000. That's nothing these days. Those in the $100,000 annual income bracket said that they could buy their American dream for an average of $192 a year. Thousand, that is. These figures indicate that we typically think we must double our income in order to find the good life, instead of finding it now in the situation where we are. Just because we don't have much does not mean we can't share what we have. And just as Jesus saw the widow's mite as a great gift, so he sees what we give as a great gift, whether it's large or small. It's what's in our heart that counts. I think that's said back here in Ecclesiastes. The teaching of Jesus in Luke 16 is also focused on a common misconception in the Jewish society that riches were equated with the favor of God. Remember Job, and poor old Job lost everything, and then everybody said, oh, you must be a sinner because you don't have any money. In the parable about the unrighteous manager, the man is squandering his master's wealth and is called into account. Faced with dismissal, the manager forgives a substantial portion of the debts so that the grateful debtors will help take care of him. From the reaction of the master, we must conclude that the manager did not act illegally and was probably forgiving usurious interest charges rather than the actual portions of the original debt. Fitted together with the remainder of the parable, we can conclude that it is God's purpose to use wealth to help those who are in need rather than to finance the lusts of the flesh. God knows that the lusts of the flesh do not necessarily bring us happiness, so he wants what is healthy for us. It's like his Old Testament dietary laws. You can look back on them now and see there was a purpose behind them. The dietary restrictions that the Jews had helped keep them in a healthy state rather than not. Luke 16:13 says, no servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Thus, Jesus is really emphasizing doing God's will ahead of making friends by doing good works. Again, looking back to where your heart is when you give whatever portion you give to the Lord's people. Okay, we're coming back to Ecclesiastes now, verses 3 through 6. Misfortune can come at any time. This, like the laws of nature, is unpredictable and out of control, which we saw last night. When the clouds are saturated with moisture, rain falls to the earth according to laws which man cannot change. Whether the tree falls to the north or south is not important, for wherever the storm topples it, there it lies, in this case in our front yard. When misfortune comes, people are advised to adjust to the setback. Usually there is nothing they could have done to prevent it. The future can neither be studied nor controlled. And I thought that was an interesting statement. I had to go over that again. The future cannot be studied nor controlled. We can study history and not learn from us, as our government never does. And it cannot be controlled. Verse 4 describes how foolish individuals act under such circumstances. Just because the future is vague and unchanging, people should not be paralyzed with inactivity. You ever know anybody so anxious they just sit, they can't do anything because they're afraid to make a mistake, or, that's not good either. People should not be paralyzed with inactivity, especially when the situation calls for vigorous action. If individuals are expressly worried about the future, they will not do anything. God has made everything appropriate in its time. There are appropriate conditions for planting and for reaping, and a farmer needs to sow at the appropriate time or there will never be a crop. Steve reads the Farmer's Almanac, and I know Wayne has a bunch of, you do it when the moon is here or the sun is there, or this day related to Easter or that day related to this. I don't know anything about that, but farmers do have their own ways of doing things. The farmer also sows with a certain amount of faith because he can't control the future weather. If he fears the weather will not be right, he will fail to accomplish what needs to be done. As people work in this world, some risks are encountered. Nobody can be 100% certain of success, and there is no one who can guarantee freedom from failure. One can only do one's best and leave it to God to choose whether or not to bless their efforts. In other words, they are not to sit around waiting for ideal circumstances before taking action. People must not let their ignorance of the future and misunderstanding of God's dealings lead them to inactivity and indifference. They must do their preordained work, be active and devoted to their calling or ministry. Solomon recommends that they labor energetically from morning until evening. Farmers should sow in the morning and evening because if one sowing fails, the other might succeed. Their labor could secure half the crops, or perhaps both sowings would succeed and they would double the crop. Verses 7 through 10. Solomon describes the inevitability of growing old. There is the happiness of life when people's energy is high. Yay, when we're a teenager and just full of energy and angst and all kinds of stuff. When the hormones are flowing. When all things seem possible and attitudes are positive. We should not be impatient due to current trials. We should not let misfortunes make us forget that life is a blessing and an opportunity for performing good works and receiving reward. Life is sweet and cherished. Therefore, it is our responsibility to enjoy and rejoice in it. God intends that we should do so whether we live long or not. Some scholars believed days of darkness, it's in quotes, in verse 8, refers to the very long time that people will spend in Sheol, while others describe these days as old age. You all remember the long dissertation the pastor gave us on Sheol versus Hades versus purgatory kind of thing. Solomon does not intend for this thought to make people feel hopeless. He wants to motivate them to make the best of life, to be satisfied in work while they can. Jesus said we must work the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. That's John 9:4. And I think with work, he's not just talking about you go into the working at the power company and then retire and stuff like that. Work is more your daily ministry where you're going out and conversing with those around you, your Bible readings, your church activities or other activities where you're blessing the world because of your presence in it. And you're thanking the Lord by living a life he envisioned for you. Solomon advises that people enjoy the blessings of God while they are young and before they grow old and die, because you can't enjoy them after you're dead. Proverbs 15:13 states, "A joyful heart makes a cheerful face, but if the heart is sad, the spirit is broken." Solomon recommends that young people follow the impulses of their hearts, but remember their responsibility to God. Good luck with that. In order to do this, they need to enjoy innocent pleasures such as would withstand scrutiny. Solomon's advice is not an endorsement to follow every sinful impulse. Solomon sanctioned moderation and God-approved pleasure, although he didn't practice it himself, as we see by our previous studies in Ecclesiastes. Enjoyment of this type should be accepted with gratitude in the present because the future is beyond our grip. If young individuals live in excess or sin, God will judge them. They could experience illness, an unhappy old age, humiliation, censure from others, but there will be consequences in their actions. Galatians 6:7 says, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, this he shall also reap." And I don't believe he's talking about sins which we've asked forgiveness for. It's, kind of like the prodigal son. What you live, you're going to end up eating the consequences of it. In the final verse, "So then banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles of your body, for youth and vigor are meaningless," or vain, vanity, as he said earlier. All people are to consciously eliminate feelings of anger, frustration, displeasure, and depression. They should take care of their physical bodies by not engaging in youthful lusts. In other words, they are to avoid with adversity they are to avoid what adversely affects their bodies and minds. Since youth is short-lived and the ability to enjoy it is limited, they must use the opportunity wisely and remember their end, old age and death. I don't know about you, but I have a little trouble not ingesting what is not particularly good for me. I did a terrible diet yesterday because Steve was fed all day, so I didn't have to cook. So I just indulged and went right on out there. And could do that when I was a young person with no consequences. But, you get older, your body reacts against it. Anybody have any comments before we go to the questions? I need a sheet of the questions. And next week, when we go in 12, we're going to talk more about aging, and then we will segue into our book, If You're Not Dead, You're Not Done. Solomon wrote that if you help others, others will help you when you are in need. What does God say about that statement? Is that to be your motivation for helping others? Anybody want to make a comment on that?
Well, if we help others, I don't look at it as if I'm helping somebody, I don't expect them to help me later,
Right. And it's not short.
It's not short.
I did this for you, you did this for me, is not it.
Right.
You help people because you want to.
I don't think people owe us. Now, there are people that are that way. I do know some people that if they help you, then they're gonna want you, and they kind of put you on a guilt trip,
I helped a guy at Eagles one day. I paid just a little bit of his bill, not a lot. And the next day he came through my line, he said, "Miss Beth, I ain't got but $5." I said, "Well, you better turn around, I didn't bring no money today." I'm not gonna help you every day. I may help you once, but I'm not gonna help you more than once. But he thought I'd pay his bill every day, and I'm like, huh. He said, "I'm just playing with you, I got money." Huh? Yeah, probably did.
Well, but like Charlie Short said, you have to do what you think's right and then leave the rest up to God as to whether
He said, "If you
they were
wanna give
needy or
people,
not.
give to them. Once that money leaves my hands and I'm giving it to them because their sign says they're gonna work for food, and I'm giving it to them with the heart that they're gonna use it for food, what happens to that money once I let it go is none of my business. They've gotta face God with what they did with it, not me. Once you give it. It's not mine.
Yep.
That's something he made very important.
I
I'm getting my brother-in-law to understand that.
had a question that came to mind yesterday. I called my sister to ask about it. We often talk weird questions and stuff. I think our society treats old age like an illness. They think as you age, it's an illness which, and some people seem to think it's contagious or something. They don't want anybody around with anybody. And we kind of went back and forth with it. I can understand both arguments. She told me about some guy out in California. They're all kind of crazy out there. I think it's the sun. Who was trying his best to not age, and he was going through all this stuff about, evidently he has the liver of a 25-year-old and the kidneys of a 25-year-old, and he's 40-something, but he has to do this special diet and all these extreme things. And she said, my question is, one day he's going to be 90, 100, maybe he'll even live past that, but he's eaten greens and done all this regimen and stuff all his life. Is he really enjoying life? But so people are trying to definitely trying not to age. If you notice all the stars with the big puffy cheeks where they've gotten stuff injected in their face and Botox, all this other stuff. Is old age an illness? It used to be revered in certain cultures. It still is. I know that Asians and stuff like that are very reverent of their elderly, but perhaps not this next generation that it's come up. Perhaps it doesn't revere the old like it used to. And I remember when I was growing up, you had to, if there was an older person, you didn't call them Janet, you had to call them Ms. Kennedy or Miss Kennedy, whatever. You didn't do that. These days, I don't want to even talk about it. But Evelyn was brought up like that. That's why she goes and says hello to every person who's older than she is, because she was taught you go in the room, if there's an older person, you go up and say hello, otherwise it's disrespectful. That's how she was raised. So it's different. But as to my question, things do happen as we get older. I know that from the aches and pains and the things going wrong. Sometimes your body starts shutting down on certain things because our organs and our teeth and we won't talk about teeth, our eyes and everything else are only meant to subsist a certain amount of time. It's a natural occurrence. So we don't say that when a child is growing up, that they're exhibiting an illness, but somehow once we reach a certain age, whichever age you want to call it, people act like we're sick. We're sick with something, not necessarily the aches and pains and stuff, and there are real illnesses that a lot of us have. But what do you think? Is age an illness, or is age the natural consequence that we will segue into past the veil into the next life? How should we treat that? Nobody knows but God. You're right.
And I think, I've seen it at Ingalls, a lot of people, a lot of different ethnic groups treat their elders differently. Some are more respectful to their elders than others. I've seen some come in and help their elders, and some come in and just be ugly. And I just want to reach out and say, that's your elder, you're supposed to respect them. I've had that happen at Walmart one day. A little girl was yelling at an older lady, Granny. This older lady at work at Walmart, when we were there, Luann, in the clothing in the closet
Yeah.
She was not very nice. But the little young girl was really letting her hold it one day, and when that girl stopped to take a breath, I said, "You need to hush." And she looked at me like, "What are you saying?" I said, "She is your elder, you need to respect her." She said, "Well, she doesn't respect me." I said, "She doesn't have to. She has lived long enough to earn the respect of an elder, of being older. You're supposed to respect her, regardless of how she treats you. When you get older, people are supposed to respect you." "Well, I just don't think that's right." I said, "Well, that's your choice." And some elderly man sitting back there, he said, "Get her, Beth." And I said, "You could have done what I did. Why didn't you say something to her?" He was just letting her give that woman up and down the road. I'm like, granted, that lady wasn't one of my best friends, but I'm not gonna let somebody be ugly to somebody if I can keep it from happening without getting fired.
We also have to, I'm at the age where I wouldn't want to be any younger than I am now. I wish my back was a little better, wish I didn't have some of the aches and pains in my hip, but I would not want to be any younger. I see things in a different light, and I think I see them sometimes more correctly. Doesn't mean I always follow them, exhibiting the donuts and ice cream I ate yesterday, but I do see them as different. I knew I should have eaten vegetables. Huh? Ice cream is my addiction, ask Steve.
Well, that's like, who is it, little kids in the grocery store.
Uh,
Mom, now I know why I didn't get to go when I was little.
Mom, I want this, Mom, I want this.
I don't think that,
My parents, they gave us a certain look and you shut up. Because you knew what was gonna happen when you got home.
I don't think the age is an illness, I just think it's part of nature, and that as we get older, I feel the presence of God more and more each day, and no matter what happens to my body, I want to enjoy each day, you know.
You still here, he chose to leave you here, so enjoy it while you're here. We all have a reason that he left us here. I don't know why he chose me, but he chose me to leave me.
Okay, so are we finished? Okay, well, I'll see you guys next week or the week after, and next week I've looked already at the lesson. I think it's going to be good.